Three. Hi, everyone, and this is John Snyson from the Economic Truth Report, and we are heading into a very special episode of number 27, where we're going to have on Allison Pyburn. And this person that I got to meet over LinkedIn, has been a very smart lady. I started to find out because she has quite the bio, and you should get excited for this interview. So let me just tell you a little bit about Allison. Allison is an accomplished journalist, editor, and economic advisor with over 2 decades of experience in the media and finance industry. She currently serves as the founder of Victoria Aurelius, an economic advisory firm where she shares expertise in economic and human design. She's leading the Great Debt Repatriation, a movement focused on self-responsibility in a time of rapid decentralization. Allison's extensive background includes 12-year tenure at Merger Market Group, where she held various roles such as senior reporter, U.S. editor for Debtwire ABS, and global editor-in-chief for Debtwire ABS. Her career has been based in various cities, including Los Angeles, New York, and London. Before joining Merger Market Group, Allison worked as an associate editor for ABS and CDOs at Source Media Asset Securitization Report and Royal Media's Home Equity News, where she published the industry's only publication dedicated to subprime and home equity lending. She briefly worked as an associate editor at Alert Global Media's Money Laundering Alert, where she focused on post 9/11 financial tracking measures. Allison began her journalism career as an editor-in-chief of the Daily Barometer, a student newspaper at the Oregon State University. During her time there, she won a 2003 Best All-Around Daily Student Newspaper Award and was selected as one of 8 college newspaper editors to study in Israel, Bulgaria, and Poland. She won the first Freedom Award for a series of articles that exposed fraud at the university. Allison has held various internships, including positions at Gannett, USA Today Network, and Charles P. Snowden Internship Program, where she reported for the Salem Statesman Journal. She was the Oregonian's first investigative reporting intern, where she focused on the EPA's water treatment policy and land application of sewage sludge, alongside famed investigative journalist Jim Long. Allison's diverse experience and commitment to journalistic excellence make her well-rounded and respected figure in the media and finance industry. So, welcome to the show, Allison. I very much look forward to talking to you.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful intro.
Yeah, so you got quite the resume there. It's quite impressive, and it's not every day that I get to talk to people that have such intricate understanding and have worked in the field of the derivative industry. Now, I try to focus quite a bit on derivatives because it's a very interesting industry, first of all, and we all know what happened, and just the timing that you were at these different agencies also was quite interesting because it's right at the run up to the CDO collapse in 2008-9, of course, and so on. So I'm very much looking forward to this. So let's get into it here. And I got the first question is, what brought you to journalism in the first place? And tell me about some of the most important news stories you've covered in your career, and why you think what do you think was important stories that you kind of covered through your lifetime?
Oh, wow. I got into journalism because I desired to reveal the truth. I've never really understood lies and deception. And I think that my desire to go into journalism was born out of my own desire to really uncover why people were lying, what they were hiding, and really what was the root of unrest in the world. when I went over to Israel, Bulgaria, and Poland, I spent time at the concentration camps, and we had a lot of meetings in the West Bank and in Israel. And I made a vow to myself at that time to really get to the root of what all of this was. What was this seemingly endless war? And that's what led me into, I knew everyone always said that money was the root of all evil. So, and it seemed like every story I ran, whether it was the EPA or money laundering itself, it was all related to greed, seemed to be related to greed. There was something to war over. And really the time covering, yeah, I mean, it was very synchronistic to be covering subprime mortgages at the only publication that was solely dedicated to subprime mortgages. At the time of the run up,
Yeah.
I knew the subprime mortgage lenders very well. And then going into covering, being the only beat reporter on ABS CDOs at the time that there was this height of financial engineering at that time. And then moving to DebtWire, we launched the ABS service right as everything was falling down. So the greed, what is the root of the greed, and what is the war really over? I mean, I think just to start this off, I would offer the broadest perspective of what a derivative is, because my journey took into the most finite levels of financial engineering that one can really dwell in. But when you zoom out to the broader perspective, the entire global monetary system is a derivative. Money itself
Yeah.
is a derivative.
100%.
So so what is that? A derivative always has a reference point. And no matter whether we're talking about mortgages, auto loans, any of this, there is a singular reference point. And that reference point is human attention. It is the intention that we give it. It is the energy that we give it. It is why we are working, right? And where we're at right now, it's like when that breaks down, when we no longer experience the monetary system as supportive of life, that's when it breaks down, because our bodies no longer will be able to make sense of it. Our bodies will not be able to justify participating in a system that is depleting life.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's kind of how I talk about our current modern, fiat currency system. We had hundreds of them throughout history, but at the same time, it's like poisoning the well, of life itself by introducing a depreciating currency that always loses value, and whatever that currency touches basically becomes toxic, or destructive in its behavior, and we've seen that, with what corporations do, what even individuals end up doing because they're forced into this. I like to call it also a Ponzi scheme in itself, because if you stop the growth of it, like currency is based upon, our whole monetary system is based upon debt. So when you stop the debt flow, the debt coming in at the bottom, which we actually have right now, which is very interesting. For the first time since the Great Depression, we see a stop in the actual debt. Actually, it's a destruction of debt happening right now, or money, of currency itself. And so what is happening is you see a basically the game has stopped right now, the musical game of chairs, and so what you're seeing is that we're having a kind of a revelation that we've more and more people are talking about it and figuring out that this system here, we can't go on with it for much longer. But the question is, what are we going to actually do about it? That's a bigger question, and we're going to go into quite deeply here in a little bit, Allison. But before that, I want to just ask a few more things, about what you experienced and so on. But I look forward to talking about the actual solutions at the end of our interview here. So, but let's go into your career in, the financial journalism, and tell me about like, so you were, looking at the post-tracking measures of 9/11 and so on, and why did those, to a certain point, big event like 9/11, comes in right after, the dot-com bubble. Of course, I feel it was like a little bit of it was a great diversion away from what really happened. But tell me about like what was the implication of why, all these tracking measures that was really implemented into the financial system, and why do you think that happened after 9/11?
Oh, what a wonderful question. I mean, yeah, it was really chaotic. My responsibility was to communicate with, there were anti-money laundering professionals all over the world who were scrambling to implement these policies, right? And not only the implementation of policies, but the tremendous, at that time, a lot of these currency transaction reports, these suspicious activity reports, they were being recorded on paper. These were paper forms, and there was a lot of there were a lot of issues, a lot of backlogs with processing all of this paper. So it's like when you ask about the intention of the regulations themselves, were the regulations resulting in a heightened financial tracking? I mean, I'd say the answer is a yes. And yes, there was heightened financial tracking. Was it effective? Was it effective? No, not really. I remember talking to, I mean, not really when you look at the intention that was stated for these measures. The one conversation that sticks out to me was in talking with a person who was, I'll just say they were in charge of security at the ports. And this person said, in this case, if you are looking at terrorist financing, it has nothing to do with money. Terrorist financing, the way that assets are moved for the experience of a terrorist attack has nothing to do with money. They don't operate in money. So there you have a bit of a division where one might question what were these regulations really about, right? What were the rules really about? I think that we can look at it and we can see an overall trend of um, increasing controls, right? When you have a system that is requiring, when you have an overall system that survives on participation in it, because remember, it's a derivative, that derivative is referencing at its basis level, it is referencing participation. It is referencing participation in the system. So as that system gets to its later stages, it's going to want to desire and create more and more control. So that's where we have a proliferation of data. We have a proliferation of controls. We have a lot in that arena. Is it effective toward anything? No, not really. Perhaps it's monetized. Perhaps it's monetized, right? Perhaps it provides additional equity for this grand derivative machine. I think that always the truth lies when you look at it from a broader perspective of the overall trend of what this is. Trying to hang on to something, you're trying to hang on to controls, so you're going to have more controls.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's uh most of these measures that have been put in, has not been so much for, the big guys in the game, or the terrorists. Actually, who is mostly hurting is the general public, that lives in the real economy. I tried to say, um and I remember as a little kid traveling around in Europe, and there was not even any metal detectors some places. And I remember the ramp up that just quickly happened. Now, I grew up in Norway, so I wasn't aware of a lot of these things. Like, it took me until 2008 to really wake up to the reality of the world that we live in. I grew up in Norway, so everything was, fine in Norway at the time. It felt like anyways. And So I went to a conference in Phoenix, Arizona, and the speaker there was a guy called Robert Kiyosaki. I don't know if you're familiar with his work or not, but he had a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and basically what it highlighted was, the whole monetary system as what it was, and how the rich took advantage of everything and used the system to their advantage, and the poor had no clue how the financial system worked, so they were stuck on the wrong side of everything and then got robbed every single time throughout history when you had calamities in the financial markets, and they also had very poor financial education, which you don't see that in any schools around the world. Not even in universities a lot of times have proper education about how the monetary system really works itself. So he was a great inspiration for me too. And then I read another book called Investing in Gold and Silver by a guy called Mike Maloney, and he kind of dragged me down the rabbit hole of monetary history. And so that's where I started to focus on that. And I've zero almost background in financial industry. The only part of it was when I moved over from Norway to Canada. I was a telecommunication technician. So I moved over to Canada, and then when I got here, I couldn't start to work because I screwed up my paperwork because I got married to my wife here, and then we did the wrong type of paperwork, so I didn't get my work permit. So I had to actually I worked at a firm that did syndicated mortgages, so mezzanine financing and so on a big real estate, commercial and multi-family real estate projects around Canada. And of course, they did second mortgages a lot of times. And by, selling that product, I understood probably a year after I did it that it was a lot of it was fraudulent, and it was, structured in a way that a lot of the investors lost a lot of money down the line. And of course, but that's the financial engineering part of it, right? That is engineered. So I learned a lot about that. But let's get into, we're starting to talk a little bit about derivatives here, and I'm very curious to, know about your career, because 2005 to 7, right? I think it was when you were focusing on ABS, and but specifically on the big thing that happened that really blew up everything was the CDOs, the collateralized debt obligations. And so you've been there for 15 years, and you focused on ABS. What in your opinion, what is your opinion on all kinds, like ABS is kind of like a broad measure. We could even like put in mortgage-backed securities under there and so on. But what is what do they do for the financial institutions, and what are the risks associated with these types of derivatives? And maybe to start with, let's try to explain to people exactly how they are structured. If you probably know a lot about them, but like from your perspective, how are they structured, and what have they done to our monetary system, especially like since it's existed for a while, but that's really when it became mid, right, and center. And now it's like derivatives everywhere.
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, so I would start with the mortgage. So a mortgage is created, obviously. A mortgage is created. When that mortgage is created, it's held at the bank. So the bank is holding this agreement. The bank is granting credit to the borrower. The bank is granting credit to the borrower, and the borrower is agreeing to pay. So the borrower is signing a contract that says, I am going to pay this mortgage for, let's say it's 30 years. There were a lot of hybrid mortgage products at that time, but we'll just stick with the basic
Yeah.
30 years. So the borrower makes a pledge that I am going to make this payment every month for 30 years. And this is the amount of the payment, this is the interest rate, and this is the valuation of the home, right? So you have these factors that are the valuation of the home and the agreement to pay. So then you have your mortgage. The banks, they lent a lot of money for a lot of mortgages. And then we had also the so-called independent firms like Countrywide Financial that was ultimately absorbed into Bank of America and quite a few others. So you have all of these mortgages, all agreeing to pay a certain amount for a certain period of time. Those mortgages are then pooled. They're pooled together. They're pooled together. And then there is a new security that is formed. And it's really a derivative. A new derivative is formed to reference all of the new derivative is formed to reference all of the anticipated future payments of this entire pool of mortgages. So let's say you have 100 mortgages. It was usually far more than that, but you have 100 mortgages. You have this whole pool of expected payments, and those expected payments are supposed to be insured by the equity, which is the home, and also the implicit expectation that this borrower is going to continue to pay. Well, you have a lot of that. There was so much of that, and the price of homes continued to go up, continued to go up, continued to go up. We had home equity loans. We had all kinds of, those were home equity loans or second liens. We had home equity lines of credit. We had all kinds of financial engineering that was also, these were also packaged into complex securitizations. A lot of the second liens, a lot of the straight second liens were actually held on bank balance sheets, but that's a story for another time. The mortgages themselves, it's like there was so much liquidity in the market that you not only had the pool of mortgages that was sold to investors, you had a secondary derivative that was created, and that is a CDO. So you take the pool of mortgages, you securitize it again, which means that you are taking the pool of mortgages and you're splicing it up again. And with a CDO and also with the initial securitization, you have what's called multiple tranches. So you have your senior investors and your junior investors. With a CDO, you have multiple tranches of senior and junior investors. You have insurance agreements. There's a lot going on. You have derivative swaps on top of derivative swaps. You have currency swaps. You have interest rate swaps. There's a lot. So it's a lot of financial engineering, all for the purpose of creating leverage. Leverage creates more capital. Leverage creates the perception of more equity, that there is all sorts of value. But really, again, when you look at it, when you back out, this is something that the mind usually cannot understand. You can only see it, which makes Mike Maloney is really unique in his ability to see structure, right? He can see it. This is something that we can see, but if you try to run it through the mind is going to just blow up and start smoking. So you kind of have to just look at it. You just have to look at it and be really real about what this is. Like, so ultimately you have all of this financial engineering that is referencing one person's ability to pay, willingness to pay a mortgage. It was a lot. And that was my experience of covering CDOs. I was really, really focused on the ingenuity behind these transactions and also how the rating agencies were able to rate these things. And I remember being at a conference. There was a global ABS conference that everyone went to every year in Barcelona. And it was so hectic. I mean, there are so many. I never went to the parties. I always was like a blur getting out of the space like really fast. But there were a lot of parties. There was a lot of fun. People were just enjoying all of the money. I remember the sobering aspect of the panels, people that were beginning to become very stressed out because they were responsible for huge amounts of funds. They were responsible for retirement funds, pension funds, endowments, all kinds of things. And I remember them saying, these agreements, these investment agreements are coming at me so quickly. I do not have time to review them, right? I do not have time to review them. Nobody understood the complexity of these structures. Everyone was playing a role. The rating agencies were playing a role. The investors were playing a role. The securitization packagers were playing a role. You know, we had we had participants at every level, but there was really no one who understood the big picture of how this was all going to go, of how it was all going to go, how it would all go down. I can share that with you if you
Yeah,
like to
yes,
know what.
please. I'll be very interested to see how you know, because it felt like, everybody was on cloud nine, and things were fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's every,
Yeah.
financial bubble. It's like from studying the Mississippi bubble back in the day, like the cryptocurrency bubbles, all kinds of bubbles. It's interesting. Everybody gets high on leverage. And even in the Mississippi bubble, it was margin debt was the leverage in the 1700s that, they fuel their massive,
Wow.
yeah, their massive bubble on. So again, like it's that, creation, and when you can make money with money, we talk about financialization, right? That is the point where the economy goes south, because the real economy, like, why would someone want to be an electrician or a farmer when they could just sit at home in front of their computer and watch, technical signals and trade things, and then feel like they're becoming wealthy? So it's a huge part of it. But please continue with what you saw then, like the whole unfolding of the derivative bubble, and what your, like, from your vantage point, what was the consensus, and how did people feel? You talked about the pension fund managers and so on. Be- Before I let you go, like, I remember, as like, I was younger in 2008. I was 26 years old, but I do remember, before I left for Canada, I do remember seeing news about pension funds blowing up in Norway. And it's like,
Yeah.
why? And it wasn't until 2010, 2011, I understood that actually it was CDOs that they had bought, and that blew up right in their face. And it was pension funds of government pension funds for a lot of our rural municipalities that blew up. Like, I think it was several dozens in Norway. So it's very interesting. But yeah, please continue on the great unbinding of the derivative bubble in 2008.
Yeah, because we're repeating that now. The pattern is super important. It's all pattern.
Yep,
Because I know Mike Maloney would agree with this. It is all pattern.
yep,
And we have experienced this pattern many times. It's all been within the same system. People think we've reset systems. We have not. We've existed in the same pattern. Um, so what ended up happening in these complex agreements was there were these triggers within the CDOs they're called default triggers. And the agreements as the CDOs are packaged are that A, B, and C could be a default trigger. And the particular default trigger that was tripped with these ABS CDOs, which were the ones that were predominantly backed by subprime mortgages. Predominantly backed by subprime mortgages, these ones. They were the highest interest rates. Um, they were the ones that were sought after the most for these instruments. So they had an agreement that if the credit rating of the mortgages themselves was lowered by, I think it was one notch, two notch, a trigger would be tripped. And when that trigger is tripped, it's called a credit event, and all of the cash flow begins to rapidly pay down the senior holders, because remember, these things are in tranches.
yep,
So the idea is that if you buy into a AAA rated tranche of a CDO, you're getting a lower interest rate, but in exchange for the lower interest rate, you are promised a greater viability of getting your principal back,
yep,
of getting your money back. So when these credit events happen, all of the money goes to pay back the senior investors. What ended up happening with the ABS CDOs is that actually the senior investors were not the note holders. They ended up not being the AAA note holders. They were actually the insurance companies. They were the derivative counterparties. So what ended up happening was that you had these derivative counterparties, which were insurance companies that came in and they said, "Oh, we'll take that now."
yep,
They just they had their own default triggers. And the default trigger that was triggered within the CDO was a default trigger per their agreement. So they took all of everything. They took everything. So we would have these oh my gosh, liquidation after liquidation after liquidation, which was done on BWICs. BWICs are uh, their bids wanted in competition is what that stands for. And they go out into the secondary securities market and investors can bid on those. And man, they were just pennies on the dollar, per the principal amount of these mortgages. Everyone wanted to know what the value of the mortgages were. It's like, how viable are these agreements? How can people pay them? Who are these people? Who are these people that agreed to these subprime mortgages? And, what is the valuation of the homes? And when does it stop? It's like everyone wanted to know at that time, what is the bottom? What is the bottom? Everyone would say, I don't want to be the one to catch a falling knife. I don't want to bid on this pool of mortgages at 50% of principal and get caught because in a week they're trading at 20, you know? So that was the huge upheaval. And I think that, at that time there were a lot of things happening at once. That's one viewpoint into one trigger point for these ABS CDOs and kind of the way things happened. That we had commercial mortgages, we had leveraged loans, we had many different events happening simultaneously. And so it was very wild. I think that we are right there again. We are right at this pattern reset. The way things go, we're right at this pattern reset.
Yeah, and let's talk about that then, since we're moving there. What do you see right now, especially because derivatives have all kinds of the asset-backed derivatives, the ABSs, they focus on several different credit things. For example, credit cards. I saw. Actually, let's quickly pull because I'm a little bit of a financial geek. So currently, for example, like what is interesting with this reporting, because it's reporting from SIFMA. You probably are familiar with SIFMA, right? And uh, I'm looking at, like, they said that like there's a red note here actually, because like they haven't come out with the 2022 numbers yet properly on what is outstanding, and it says there the ABS outstanding database is under maintenance. Update expected summer 2022, but I haven't seen anything yet. So it's very interesting. But at the time, and I'm looking at the numbers here, they're in the billions. And at the time of quarter four in 2021, automobile, yeah, that's another big thing with asset-backed securities, is the automobile loans, of course, that are collapsing now because of our current cycle that we're in. And they were at 220 billion. 0.6, credit cards 53.9 billion, equipment, so that is probably leasing and so on, loans, all kinds of different things for different corporations, that's at 80 billion. Other, which is at 265.5, student loans, which is another scam in my point of view, is at 146 billion. And then the CDO/CLO shows, we gotta go and look at the actual detail there, because there's different now there's a different player in the game. But the CDOs are at 67.9 billion, and then you have 635 billion of loans and CLOs, and I think that's where we're seeing the next crisis. I don't know if you agree or not, but I'd love to get your look at what you foresee next, because you lived right in the great derivative cycle there. Now we have in the other one, but it's all caused by the whole run up in credit. I call it peak debt, and then nobody can pay the debt anymore. It becomes so unsustainable that nobody can, right? So then the debt collapses, and then of course all the stacked layer of derivatives on top of them goes, right? So yeah, let's go into what you see now, that are happening in the derivative market, since you're so familiar. You're not like right in it right now, of course, but what do you foresee like that are happening with the current derivative market, and what's what's going to come of it very soon, I think.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing to remember, I got into a lot of detail, and it's, I mean, you can get into a lot of detail with this stuff. You can research the triggers, you can research the potentiality of these rating agency actions and all of the stuff. It's just intercreditor agreements. And I certainly did all of that then. From this vantage point, the one thing that I feel is super important to point out is that when you have a derivative system, when you have a derivative system by nature, it survives by creating more leverage. It must be fed. So, what does that leverage end up looking like? Just with the mortgage situation, what ended up happening was that by the time that it got to its height with these subprime mortgages, you had mortgages that were so untenable in terms of the borrower's ability to pay
Yeah, the
that
ninja loans, right?
default, yeah, they would default. They would default before the first payment. They
Yeah.
would default on the first payment, right? They wouldn't even make the first payment because there was such a hunger. There was a hunger to feed all of this financial leverage,
Yeah.
right? All of this financial leverage looking at a singular reference point. So no matter whether we're talking about mortgages or what we're about to talk about, the overall pattern is the same. You have a tremendous amount of leverage referencing what is ultimately a human being. And in a lot of cases with the subprime mortgages, they were totally fraudulent. You know,
Yeah.
they were originated with I mean, hopefully the person could fog a piece of glass, but that was kind of the joke. It's like, if the person can fog a piece of glass, we will give them a mortgage, right? So, but in some cases that wasn't even true.
Dead people
So
you're
here
talking
we are.
about. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. So here we are now,
Yeah.
fictitious people, I think maybe.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But here we are now, and what do we have? It's like we have a situation where yes, we had a tremendous deflation in 2008. Absolutely, we did. Though we have inflated back to where we were in 2008 and beyond that.
Yeah, and we didn't hit the level of actually like pure deflation in the case that actually the monetary number, so the number of digital units in the monitors, like it actually didn't go negative in 2008.
Correct.
This is the first time since the Great Depression that it's happened. So yeah, continue.
Yeah. So we're sitting at a very interesting place because what ended up happening is like there were all these conversations after 2008. And frankly, I am one to say, I don't feel like anyone was ready. I do not feel that anyone was ready for a new system. Um, Nobody understood, nobody I talked to understood holistically what was going on. Everyone was trying to scramble and plug holes,
Yeah.
and the rules couldn't be followed. The rules as they were, even Dodd-Frank, of course, like those rules have not been followed. They can't. You can't pass financial reforms in the manner that they were trying to and continue the system. You can't have it both ways. The leverage is needed in order to keep the system moving. So that's how number one, nothing was intrinsically changed. Number two, the financial reforms that came through realistically could not be followed. We got ourselves pretty much back to the same place as we were before, with some important differences. I think that this time, instead of looking at the viability of mortgages, instead of looking at the viability, you mentioned CLOs, which, by the way, I think it was CRE CDOs that were banned in Dodd-Frank, though they came back as CLOs. They started
Yeah, yeah,
originating
yeah, exactly.
CRE
Yeah.
CLOs. It's like, it's okay. I mean, I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we're aware that we've just been in the same paradigm again, and we are aware that we've been leveraging up again, maybe with different assets, maybe with some
Yeah.
of the same. You know, with housing, it's the same. The difference, though, is that this time we're not looking at just one asset class. It's the entire system.
The
what we
everything bubble, yes. Mike Maloney
the,
likes to call it. Yeah.
it's the everything bubble, and we're looking at the viability of living in a debt-based system overall, and I don't think many people would articulate that, but it's what is unspoken. It's like, well, we don't really want to go through this again. Actually, the reality is that 2008 was really traumatic. It was traumatic. I mean, you had people who were ostracized, you had people who were heartbroken, you had a lot of dashed hopes and dreams, and nobody wants to replay that. And I think that everyone was kind of crossing their fingers, hoping that this time it would be different. And we all know how that goes, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
maybe if we play it again, it'll be okay this time. But this is, I think that in terms of international relations, in terms of the way that the mortgage debt was exported, I mean, I think it may have bankrupt Iceland as a whole, right? The
Yeah.
ABS-CEOs took down these banks in Iceland, and I think it's one of those things where other countries started to really consider how they were going to play it differently. It was sort of this realization that maybe one currency, maybe everyone living under one currency, which we really have been for a long time, is not the most viable system for everyone, right? And so then I think a given is decentralization for sure, right? There's going to be a intrinsic desire to have more control, and we might see the appearance of an ultimate control where there's a desire to pull everything under a singular umbrella, quite in a way that's very visible, because we
Yeah,
really are.
the kind of the last tick up on the pendulum, to full
Yeah,
totalitarianism instead of
yeah,
like moving back. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. So we might see that. It reminds me of the height of leverage in the mortgage. I remember this structure called the constant proportion debt obligation, CPDO. So this was an ABS CPDO, and this thing was so leveraged. It was, talk about an everything bubble for mortgages. It was so leveraged, it couldn't even get off the ground. So if you try to add a whole other layer of leverage with something like a very visible totalitarian system, that thing's going to be so leveraged, it's going to fall, right? It's not energetically supported because, again, just as it was with mortgages, you have a tremendous amount of leverage that is ultimately referencing the same ability to focus on and believe in a system. The willingness, all of it is hinging upon the willingness of humanity to participate in a system. That's it. That's all they've
Yeah.
got. That's all you've got in the system. So we breach believability. When we breach believability, then we really reset. Then we
Yeah, and
really reset.
yeah, exactly. It's the reason why I have all these dead currencies behind me is because of that belief stopped. And
Yeah.
suddenly it took between a month to 6 months every single time. There's no difference in world history. I can't find one that hyperinflated over like longer time, but it's that breach of trust in the value of what you're trying to exchange by doing, economic interactions as human beings. And you're seeing it right now. I still have my blue collar job on the side that I do, and I work with like people that have real struggles in life with, they're now struggling to pay their mortgages. They're struggling to, afford to even put food on the table with like decent jobs. And when that happens, there's a lot of conversations right now with the everyday person, that, like, yeah, this is like, oh, I don't know where this is going to take me. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do here, kind of thing. So there's a lot of questioning happening. And I think we're getting, in 2008, that was one thing. But I think this time, as you said, the questioning I have started to happen. And I think that's an important point to make, because when the breach comes, and they tried, we talk about regulation since 2008. You had the creation of the kind of the G20 movement with inside of that, they created a global financial regulator. You're probably very familiar with the Financial Stability Board that was created in 2000. Well, it was before that, it was the Financial Stability Forum with Mario Draghi created it. And but then it really started to take center stage. But it's that, move to the totalitarian beliefs that, oh, we could just have one global regulator that, pushes our 20 people that are sitting on the board, ideas to every single body on planet Earth. It's not viable, but uh, that's why we're seeing these structures, like the United Nations and of course underneath that the ideas that are getting pushed by the World Economic Forum and all kinds of other NGOs around the world of the belief that we need this one world, type of setting and one currency we could do so much better if everybody was on the same page kind of thing. And I think that's just not viable uh, with the diversity of human thought that we have. And I think that's going to fail quite miserably. But, as you said, they could potentially take us there, right? But so back to, what you're seeing here is we're just seeing the repeat again, but we're seeing it on such a broad level now. And as you say, there's the reason why you created Victoria Airlines. And maybe we can, yeah, let's get into that now, into your organization that you have and what you're talking about, the great debt repatriation, because there is a reset coming. And I think you made a great point, which not a lot of people do, unfortunately, is we should be moving more to a more decentralized type of setting, where you have that self-responsibility. And behind me here, I have like kind of a flag. It's the flag of the anarcho-capitalist movement.
Oh, wow.
And but I'm also on top of that, I'm a voluntarist, which is it's not volunteering. I do love volunteering, but a voluntarist actually believes that you should have your own society based upon your own beliefs. And I think that's kind of where we're heading here, where the world needs to, move back to a more decentralized function. Because I don't think, our technological world is just going to not just disappear, into the ether, and we're going to go all back to them like, hey, man, I
No,
definitely don't think that. But what I
no.
do think is that we have to move away from our system, because or else we're going to go that very last mile. We've seen here in Canada, by the way, I don't know how much you pay attention to, what's happening with the government here with Justin Trudeau, passing measures now, actually limiting, the content on, like what I'm creating and so on, to be like, oh, we got to have X amount of Canadian content because we can't let people see all the world's content, be
Oh, wow.
terrible for inclusion of thought, in the world. And so you're seeing those moves left, right, and center. I think the Western world, we're so over indebted. Also, but on the other side, though, it's like everybody's talking about the BRICS and what they're doing. Oh, but it's going to be like Russia and China, combining. But China just have a even bigger debt bubble than North America, like than both Canada and my home country, Norway, even Sweden, and a lot of the Scandinavian countries have they just leverage everywhere, and we can't go on with this. And so what, talking about that, and let's get into for a while here, what do you think is the better way, or like, yeah, it's a part of the way what your solution is, because others might have other ways of thought, but it's important to have all these solutions out to people, of what is your organization, Victoria Rarely, is focusing on, and what do you think and foresee as a better way out of things, and yeah, I'm very much looking forward to hearing solutions, because people all talk about how bad things are, but a lot of people don't have solutions. But I think you have at least one of them.
Thank you. Yes. So after 2008, uh, I was with Debtwire until I think it was 2019, early 2020. I was following all of the litigation, all of the mortgage litigation. There were, I mean, all of the mortgage putback stuff, and started studying student loans. And in the course of that, it was radically obvious to me that this pattern was going to repeat. So I spent the last few years studying what was left of the monetary system to study, which was looking back at the inception of the system in human evolution. When did this system start? Why did it start? And what are we really doing here? So that led to Victoria Elias, which means victory of the light. It's an advisory. I've been working with predominantly individuals and groups who are interested in launching, um, the best way I can describe environmental, though it's not the fake green stuff. It's not the stuff that's to be monetized. These are initiatives that are truly in the greatest good of humanity. So it's been there is
Real
so
real
we
sustainability, if you could call it that.
the
A lot
real
of people, yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of talk by these organizations about sustainability, but all that it is just fake.
Oh yeah.
It's a cash grab basically. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not talking about solar panels. I'm not talking about windmills. I'm talking about real repurposing efforts to bring in all of the abundance that is really present for us here, to create streamlined delivery mechanisms. Because as you said, we will have high technology and it exists now. It's just that everything at the very height of leverage that we've been in, it's like all of these ideas would need to be siphoned through a particular system. And that system requires front end gains. It requires a lot of check marks that this new system trying to be born simply cannot fulfill. So it's like, what is the new system? And you mentioned all of humanity being on the same page, and in terms of something like, let's say there is a totalitarian presence that you know that's a lot of control, and I think what we're moving away from is the notion of external control, period. And we are moving into the debt repatriation is moving into radical self-responsibility, which is just being
Well, it
real. It
sounds
means no,
scary though.
yeah, it's really no one's getting in trouble.
No,
It's
no, but
really
I'm saying that as a joke because
yeah,
it's like I'm 100% for radical self reliance. Like
yeah.
you should be you should be in charge of your own life kind of thing. So yeah, it's great. Continue.
Yeah, it's kind of like what ended up happening is that on an individual basis, right? When we participate in a job, and this is happening a lot now, we already had the Great Resignation. I don't know if that's still a thing, but it's there's definitely another wave that's happening right now where people are just they're exhausted and they're like, I can't do this job anymore. And they may not even be able to say why. It's like, I can't go into this office and stare at this computer screen and do this life anymore. It's not my passion. So people are naturally being compelled to live within their innate passions in life. That's what we're actually here to do. We are here to express our innate intelligence, our innate passions. And, that I'm not saying it's impossible in the system that we've come from, but in a lot of ways, it can feel very restricting because the propensity is for humanity to say, okay, I'm looking at a structure with a lot of rules and I've got to figure out how to make money. And the figuring out of how to make money takes precedence over innate expression of our unique talents and abilities that we're already born with. So people end up in positions where they're out of alignment. They are literally energetically, they're out of alignment, and they're not going to be generating that passion, that energy that is necessary for life. So we get disease, we get dis-ease, we get a lot of people that are on antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. We have a lot of people right now that are in escapism, right? They just want to turn on Netflix, they want to turn on YouTube, they want to tune into anything but what's right in front of them. And that's actually very difficult on the psyche. So it's like what do we get to move into is actually really exciting, and it's sort of like I can walk into, I was near Portland yesterday. I was not in Portland, but I was close enough. It's like I can go into downtown Portland if I'm radically honest, which is pretty easy to be. It's like, wow, what I'm seeing are a lot of vacant buildings, right? Tons of vacant buildings and a lot of people living on the street. So this is all about letting go of all of the reasons why, letting go of all the reasons why we should support the debts and moving that very, really very slightly to how do we support life, right? How do we support life? How do we support and nurture humanity? Because we're all one family.
Mhm.
It's like there is a lot of duality right now. There's a lot of people trying to yell at one another. We are all in this together. We are all in this together. We've moved through this together. We've grown up together. And now we're at this point where it's like, okay, this old game that we played has reached its limits, right? It's reached its limits for life. We have soils that are ready to be enriched. We have so much. It's like, wow, we have all these buildings. So how can we retrofit these buildings to serve the needs of the community? And that's where you shift from servicing debts to servicing life, to servicing the needs of the community. And it's everything that's right in front of us, right? It's all right in front of us. And it requires really nothing. It's what we all desire to do in our hearts. We all love family. We all love each other to the best of our ability. And it's like, let's just live our lives, and this is a time where debt repatriation, it just means you had the intention for living married to a system. It's like my intention for life is to make money. My intention for life is to make money. So now when we take that power back into self, our intention for life is to live life. So what are our true needs, right? What are the true needs of the self, of the earth, versus what are the needs of the system? That's taking it back. And again, it's not the fault of the system. It's not the fault. I mean, man, all these people that I got to talk to all these years, they're very kind. I got to talk to very kind people who are just doing their jobs like everyone else. It's not their fault. It's not any one person's fault. We're all in this together. So we get to move through this together, right?
Mhm. Yeah, so in your system that you have, like that you think of, like how would everyday life look like? How let's say that we've achieved, and it doesn't have to be everyone, because like we can't push ideas on everyone. But in your type of society that you want to live in, how would your structure kind of look, and what do you see as, I totally agree with you with the find our passion and then live it, because there's certain things that I do that I really don't like to do, but I have to make money. But
Yes.
then there's things like this that I'm doing right now that just like time just flies, and
Yeah.
I make like an income slowly automatically from it, and it's just a passion for understanding. Like when you study like macroeconomics and monetary history and so on, you really study human history and humanity and beliefs itself and psychology and so on. You really, when you get to the higher level of looking at things, like you really look at human behavior and how we function as a human being to our true potential. And you really, like as you said, you're really stuck at that point where a lot of people, like billions of people probably around the world are stuck in this doom loop, or some people like to call it a rat race, or other things where they need to survive, but within the system has just basically strangled them into being, a lot of times they're debt slaves.
Yeah.
It's a very strong word, but you kind of like shackled to being having to do something that you probably don't really like, but you have to do it to survive. Instead of, if we got taught to try to find our true meaning on this planet for the time being that we're here. And so, yeah, let's hear what you think that, if you lived in your, well, let's not call it utopia, but let's call it, a better version of today. Like, how would that look your everyday life?
So everyday life, it's I feel like one of the best ways, and again, there's a really important differentiation, which is that we are we are not moving into a new system created by the mind. We are not moving into a new system that someone created and has control over. Exactly what we are moving away from, what we are growing up from, is giving our power away. So this isn't about giving our power away to some new structure, some new system.
Mhm.
We will probably see a lot of ideas rise up, and the way that the human works, the way the human body works, is they will ultimately be rejected, because where we're at in our evolution is a time of, it's like, oh, I know how to live my life. I need to express in the way that I know how to express. I can no longer give my power away to someone I perceive as external to myself, as some external authority, because that was really painful before. The body's going to remember the pain of losing all that energy, because people get depleted, they get sick, and they get really sad and depressed. As you said, they get in these loops because they feel, ultimately the loops are the result of feeling disempowered. So this is all about personal empowerment, and really the best way to look at it is to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you make it really simple. Bring it down to the lowest common denominator of what do we need for life, and ultimately at the top of that triangle is self-actualization. So we are moving toward self-actualization. We are moving toward empowerment of the self, right? So at the very bottom level, we need the basics. We need clean water. We need food. We need thriving communities that have access to gardens that are local, right? Local food. Um, then you move up the scale and you need, obviously we need shelter. I can't forget that.
Yeah.
Repurposing. We'll have a lot of repurposing. We will have a lot of repurposing. You move up the scale, we're going to need participation. People need each other. We need community. We need purpose. We need shared purpose. And we move up. We need love. We need caring. We need nurturing. That is what we have missed. It's like,
Well, we
wow.
let greed take over basically in our
Yeah.
lives. Like that's greed, fear, and love is the three
Yeah.
basics of how we live as human beings and what drives us. And when you let one of them take over too much, like it's okay to have a tiny little bit of greed to feed yourself, of course, but other than that is like be driven by a better purpose, right? And I think if you're driven by love versus by the greed, you can accomplish a lot better things in life, I think.
Yes, exactly. And we're past that point energetically. So it's sort of like the way people are pushing back against what they call mainstream news. It's like all of these headlines of, peddling fear. It's like, I just don't want to hear that anymore, because there's so much good in the world, right? There's so much beauty. And so the new system is an organic one. For lack of a better word, organic is a widely marketed term, but it's my best way to say that it's organic life. And we have tremendous technology. I talk to people all the time that have that have been gifted these amazing technologies. I would say something like hydroponics, and I know it's far beyond even hydroponics, the ability to deliver food systems to many people. What you're going to have is, the way I describe it the best is, essentially we're going to have a lot of concentric rings. And you're going to have a ring. Let's say I'm talking about Portland, Oregon, since I'm close to there right now. We place a ring around Portland, Oregon. Maybe you get a group of people together who are inspired to look at that city. It's like, okay, where are we at? How many homeless do we have? What is our access to food? What is our access to food? How's our air? How is our water? So it's looking at those fundamental factors and working together with those who are skilled in these areas, because there are people who are very skilled in these areas. I talk to them all the time to come in and they will retrofit the water. They will retrofit the access to food in that area. We'll bring in a lot of urban gardens, right? We will convert the vacant office buildings into housing for people that need housing. And then you're going to move up into psychological needs, right? Psychological needs, healing needs of the people. It's like, where is that at? You know, okay, so let's bring in the people who are really well versed at working with people that are having some psychological problems, right? Helping them to get aligned with who they are. And we go up and up and up that triangle of need. And all of the needs are met. It's really very simple. I think that the difficulty comes in moving through that. It's really a ring of fire. It's moving through that alchemy of acceptance that, yeah, this is where we're at. We are all in it together. We know that we must address our basic needs, that bringing in another lithium mine is really not the solution here, because then there's just going to be another need for another lithium mine. This is about a great, great, great repurposing and a new definition of value. I am not more valuable than anyone else. No one else is more valuable than me. We are all intrinsically valuable. And we access our intrinsic value as we move up that scale of self-actualization, because we know who we are and we know what we have to offer to someone else. Right? There's a Nordic school, I forget the name, but the whole purpose of it was, who am I and how do I serve? Who am I and how do I serve? We as humanity intrinsically desire to serve. We desire to share our unique gifts with one another. So we get to do that. That's where we're at. Everyone that is here right now is here and well aware of what we are moving through.
Yeah.
We are aware of what we're moving through. And it's normal. I mean, it's normal for people to try to hang on to old patterns, to try to hang on to fear, because it's familiar,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think the great decentralization, I like to call it, the moment when people realize that we're in all the trouble we're in because of our old system. And at one point you have that radical change that, I think, like, as we grow up as human beings, we kind of slowly, like, we've been inching, towards more and more type of like self-reliance on ourselves, as being able to, run our own lives, but we still have those old governance structures. I call, like, actually today's system, as a remnant of the feudalist system, because at the end of it, like, all these politicians and everything, all they do is just looking at themselves as feudalist overlords, and they know better than everybody else what everybody else should do, instead of, like, because what they're afraid of is exactly what you said, that self-realization of human beings, of their true potential, and who they could really be as a human being, because that's the people that like to be in control. And unfortunately, there are people that, throughout history, that, that love that way of thinking, and we're kind of naturally built in, a hierarchy, from, our old, very old, like, since we, got created. Who knows how we got created, right? But um in that way, is, as human beings, wake up slowly over time, you start to realize that, maybe I am important. Maybe I don't need anybody to control my life. That's how I live my life. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do other than what I think I should do with my own life and my own body. Why should I listen to anybody, trying to force stuff onto me, and so on? And I'm not that type of person. But I think if there will definitely be, like, others that want, somebody to have their life and control their life, and I don't think we should interfere with those beliefs, and not, like, say, like, oh, I know way better than you, like, I have the self-actualization. But if people don't want to have that, well, go ahead, you can have that, I think, because I think it's going to be impossible to, have everybody understand that, self-actualization and understanding, why we're on this planet, kind of thing, is going to be the thing for everybody. But I do think that if we do create a system that's there, for that to happen. Like look at today's educational system. It's such a old remnant of the Persian system to create obedience and so on into people. I think if you just create those things and educate kids, like I had the pleasure actually to sit down and educate like kids from age 8 till 19, I think they were. It was a whole family of like eight kids, and the mom and dad was there, and I sat there for 3 hours and homeschooled the kids on monetary history and what
Wow.
could happen and so on. And, yeah, good luck getting that. you know,
Yeah.
in a modern system. So I really, people that, are on the forefront of this, trying to, create systems for everybody else that, and especially I'm more on the side of like the self-reliant type of systems that you propose rather than, this, systems that push, that we have to have somebody in control. People are very afraid of that because we've been, you know, I don't know, propagandized and like had that shoved into our mind that we need someone to tell us what to do kind of thing. But if we can have that on a greater scale, and I think it's happening, as you said, where people are starting to find these ideas that you have and other ideas that tell yourself that you could actually rely on yourself. I personally, I have a big garden here at home, and I'm one of the few still on the block because I live in a retirement community
Mm.
that actually have full organic. Like I do no-till like gardening and so on. And wh- uh, people are slowly waking up to what the current system has done to our food supply, to our water and air. And uh, the thing is, like, where people focused, and this is so important, is that people have focused on the commercialization and elites have tried to latch onto the control of the green movement by saying that, oh, we need this and that and so on. And you see that, like, how about we focus on what's best for where we live? It's
Yes.
because my energy source might be different. Like here, for example, in the province that I live in, and actually back in my home country, Norway, most of our energy was delivered by hydro, by water, processing water and using that. And you still have, nature around it, living and so on. And it's a lot lower impact, but it was the best type of energy for here. If you go to the Moroccan desert, like in the Saharan desert and those northern African countries, for example, they would be greater served to have solar power, for example. And might be places that, it's so desolate and it's hard to, have any type of energy. How about a modular nuclear plant, for example, and so on? Now,
Mm.
our current system is going to still be there with, the hydrocarbons and so on, but it's during the time that it takes us to find better technologies to replace, the current system, we still need that, as a part of it. We can't just eliminate it. The people that say that, oh, we're gonna have it gone, in 5 years, that's crazy to me as well. So, but having that, but then, I think a great thing, and I don't know if you agree with this, but having, taking away the corporate structure, for example, because
Mm.
the corporate structure of today is based upon not having a self-responsibility. Because it's like, yeah, it's nobody in this corporation have any responsibility, because if they default or whatever they do, you can't really you sue the corporation, but not you can't sue the individuals in the corporations kind of thing. Um,
Mm.
so I think if you had you still need business, but if people are actually, have responsibility of that business, and they actually will be held accountable for their choices, if they're bad or not, right? I think that would greatly, enhance our experience as human beings on this planet. Because I'm not for, removing everything, but like having things where you actually have responsibility, and I think that just gives so much back, that you would care a lot more about things around you. All the crazy industrial farming that's going on, which I think it's totally unsustainable. I have a friend of mine. I give a shout out to Matthew Smith, that he sold everything like that he had in the US. He moved on to Uruguay, and now he runs a ranch, which he focuses on more reliable type of farming that he does. And doing things like that, just having that self-reliance as human beings, and then focusing on the technology, because today's system is not allowing for that to happen. You know, well, the better ideas are just getting strip mined basically by the monetary system, instead of having, you know, ideas that can be, you know, funded out there, and having a system like, I'm for like not removing, you know, our medium of exchange, but I'm for having a medium of exchange, for example, that is going to keep its value, because then you don't steal away from the people, and actually delivering, you know, a system that will give you, you could keep, you know, the value within, and then you could actually help people. Like you could be a lender, for example. But if you actually have to have, you know, the collateral to back it. You know, in today's system, we talked about, you know, the modern derivative-based system. Well, you don't have to have that currency in any formal way in the modern banking system. They actually could just create it out of thin air. If you actually had to, you know, have built that up as a base and then being able to give it out to others, based upon that. I'm not against that type of a system, but you need something. You need to take away the insane leverage that gets created when you can create money with money or currency with currency. You take away that power from humanity of, like, you just destroy everything that it touches. So yeah, so going back to, you know, what do you want to do? Like you said that you are moving to Sweden now. So I'm curious to, like, so what is the way forward for you, where you're heading right now with, you know, your ideas and the system that you want to have as a part of where you live? What do you foresee of what's going to happen? Let's make a time frame of the next 10 years, because I think a lot of will have happened, you know, at the end of the next 10 years.
Wow. And thank you. That's beautifully stated. Um, I feel like ultimately, ultimately, when we're looking at a system, like humanity is already a system. Humanity is already a system. We are in a
Yeah,
system, we are a system of intelligent life. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let go of that white knuckle grip on our perception of control and allow ourselves to be held by the organic system that is already present for us. And I think that, to your point of, you know, different ideas coming forward, you know, maybe new currencies that are proposed, it's always going to be, with any sort of system, it's very simple to see what is the fruit of that system. What is the fruit of that system? And are we living for a system, or are we living for life? You know, is our intention for being rooted in a system, no matter the currency, or are we empowering our innate currency?
yeah,
Because human beings are electromagnetic. We have an electric currency that runs through our body. And what ends up happening when we're not expressing is actually very important. When we are not expressing within ourselves, when we're not allowing ourselves to be lit up, that's when we move into disease, depression, all of these lower states. So it's actually, it is vital. And as the system goes, as it goes, it's like it's similar to 2008. I remember in my personal experience, I remember when PIMCO pulled out of investing in ABS CDOs, and I was like, whoa, it's happening. You know, this is really big news. And it wasn't long before everyone else started pulling back from buying ABS CDOs one by one. And it just goes that way, where it begins with a trickle, and then it's whoa, it's, you reach that
yeah. It's
critical mass,
sudden. Yeah,
whole thing. Yeah. It's like the whole thing goes. And the reality is, when you look at our jobs, let's take the United States, for example. I'm pretty sure that the majority of jobs are related to debt service. Our GDP is intrinsically tied to debt service in the US, other places as well. So when we no longer have that, look at all of the human potential that we have. Look at all of the human potential that we have, all the jobs that will be cleared simultaneously. um, it's a big rebuilding effort. This is a huge rebuilding, right? So there are a group of us, that are really focused on this rebuilding effort. That's what I'm doing personally. I'm focused on it every single day, focused on having these conversations like I'm having with you. I feel the more that we talk about this, the more that we bring it out in the open, the more that we share ideas, on the building of this, on the building, on the rebuilding, on the repurposing, on what is possible, the more that we empower ourselves to move through this event. You know, um, it's shaming one another and pointing out what is wrong. We all know what is wrong with the old system, that's not working. We all know that. Um, so I think that's really important. Over the next 10 years, I think, again, it's a factor of how rapidly this moves. And when you are looking at in the scope of human evolution, taking it way back, this is a rapid evolution event. This is a rapid evolution event where you are looking at an evolutionary leap. And it's like, okay, you have played out that pattern now, and you're not going back to that pattern. It's time to step into the new. And so that is the leap. It's that we are stepping into the new. And it's one of those things where, ready or not, it's here. Right.
Yeah, it's a great paradigm shift
Yeah.
for I think for humanity. I think we're finally realizing that yeah, this is not the way to go forward anymore. It's a system that would just bring death and despair around it, and it's time to move forward to other ideas. And I look forward to, and it's going to be crazy, probably the road there, but I look forward to one thing though that I'm mostly worried about is the blaming, as you said, that's going on, and the propaganda machine itself of control really like to use that fear and the greed of it to push their agenda. And this has happened so many times throughout history. Is that when the system fails and they still want control, they try to divert your attention with a great war, for example. Really dividing and conquering people. And so my like for us to have this actualization of things is we need to, for anything that it's worth, to really stand up against, because they really want a war, the people in control, and especially all wars are banker wars, as someone has stated, and they're run, by because you could print, however much you want, and then fund the effort to then say like, oh, these guys are evil, let's go after them, and that division that happens there really has like held us away from actually cooperating on a greater level of actually what is best for me as an individual in a nation state. Like I don't think we're going to have nation states in 20, 30 years from now, potentially. I think we're going to have those decentralized type of systems. But until we get there, and we need to stop this by any means, by our ideas coming out there that are greater than, the ideas of, blaming each other to the level of, starting and inciting violence on each other, because that's the problem with human beings as well, is that we also have that innate built in us that we want to have that greed take over, and that's what war is it's that greed to tell everybody that, oh, it's like we need to stop this from happening, or something. Like we're seeing that right now in Europe, of course. And so what is your thoughts on how can we stop that? Like I think you have similar ideas to what I have, but how can we stop people from getting stuck in that very dangerous doom loop that could happen within the next probably couple of years, when the system really starts to fall apart?
Yeah, that's very simple. See, our one currency is our focus. Our one currency is our focus. It is what we are focused on, what we choose to believe,
Hmm.
which leads into what we are willing to participate in. I think war does not have much energy when people are not participating in it.
100%.
when people are not participating in it. It's like if you look at World War II, the taking it back to the beginning of the interview when I was walking through these concentration camps, it's like, wow, that would have been a lot different if nobody was participating, if the
Yeah,
SS officers were not doing that. Just
yeah,
don't do that. It's very
yeah,
simple. Don't do that. You know, it's like we all know the truth inside of our hearts. We all know the truth inside of our hearts, and the courage comes in when we say, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore. You just say no. I remember I was in a really difficult situation in my life, and this was what was this 2018, as all of this crazy stuff was happening in that I was covering in the financial world.
yeah,
I had stuff going on in my personal life that was super crazy. And I remember a friend called me and said, "You don't have to participate in that." I said, "What? I don't have to participate in that." He said, "No, you just pull away." And it changed my life because he was right. I did pull away. I did not participate in this proceeding that was going on. And the reality is that that changed the trajectory of my entire life. It's called self-responsibility. It's called not doing what someone else is telling you you should do, right? Because that person that's telling you, there is no one that has an authority on the truth in your life. No one but you has an authority on the truth for you. So we could never exist in the evolution of humanity. We can never exist in a system where someone else is telling us what our truth is, where someone else is telling us what we should do. And the viability of any system is going to depend on, does it support life? Are you nurtured? Are you supported? Is this a nurturing and supporting system for your unfoldment in life? Or is this a control system? Is
yeah.
someone telling you what you should do, who you should be, censoring you, right? That is the antithesis. And really, this is our own shadow. We are merely moving out of our own shadow into self-responsibility and the grander scale. Next
Y-
10 years, it's
Yeah, go
exactly
ahead.
what we're yeah, that is exactly what we're doing. It's gonna grow in pace, and yeah, I mean, I don't want to project anything for the near term, though I do know that we are moving through this, right? And on the other side, it's beautiful. On the other side, it is so beautiful. So beautiful.
Yeah, it's like maybe we look back at this period that's coming as the age of self-realization and and radical self-responsibility. Wouldn't that be fantastic if the history books, will write about this period of time where we actually found out that maybe we shouldn't do what we've done the last 1,000 years, with this paper or digital currencies. Maybe that was a really bad idea. And I think like we're coming up on actually the 1,000-year anniversary of paper currency itself.
Wow.
With the creation, it was the Sung Dynasty in 1024, and I have up right there. I have the plate, the first plate that was ever created, to print on a paper currency, and it was 1024, and so we come into that very important 1,000-year anniversary. And as humans, we like to talk about things like that. It's like maybe that 1,000-year anniversary should be the time when we actually realize that the last 1,000 years was a pretty bad idea.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think, if every single person just imagined, if every single person imagined their life being over right now, it's like, because it can happen so fast.
Mhm.
You're pulled out of your body, you're looking down at your life. What are you going to do? What would you do differently? Because this is your life.
Yeah.
This is your life. It's your reality. It's your perception, your focus. It's all you. And we have a tremendous gift here. So we're really just realizing it.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, let's leave it at that, Allison. It was fantastic having you on. I really enjoyed our
So
conversation and your deep insight, but also, your passion about actually changing the world for better, because I do like to find people that really want to have a better world to live in. because we do need to change, and I think it's coming due for that time in our world that we'll, hopefully a lot of us will, have the self-realization of, yeah, this is not functioning very well, and we need to take and find ourselves. And I think if we could teach that to enough people, that find your way that you really enjoy, every single hour that you spend on certain things. If we could have that as a part of our system, think about where we would be as humanity. Like, we're not going backwards in time. We actually take, I think, a gigantic leap forward. Uh, not to talk about what government says when they do that. The Great Leap Forward was, of course, Mao, but actually, like, with self-responsibility instead of having somebody else tell us what to do. I think let's leave it at that, Allison, and thank you for coming on again. But let people know where they could find all your thoughts and your work and what you focus on.
Wonderful. Yeah, I will send you a link. Right now, the best way to find me is on Substack. That's where I'm publishing the most often. So I'll send you a link to that, and people can follow me there.
Yeah, please do so, and we'll share everything, and we'll put this up in a few days. So it was great having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.